Welcome to GBN America. We're talking economy today, and we're talking to Mark Mattson. He is Matson Money CEO. Welcome.
Great to be with you.
Good to have you. Okay, let's start first with the Fed, and specifically, let's just go into what do you think is going to happen this month? Will rates be lowered once more before the end of the year?
It's kind of like trying to guess the Fed is trying to read a crystal ball here. It's above my pay grade. But what I want people to understand about the Fed, they have a huge misnomer. And that misnomer is that they actually control interest rates. In reality, the Fed basically follows interest rates around. Interest rates go up, they're going to slightly raise the rate. Interest rates go down, they're going to slightly reduce the rates. And so people make the mistake of trying to get myopically focused on what somebody at the Fed may or may not do, because they believe if they can get a fix on that, then they can predict the stock market. National central banks all over the world have done widely different things over the last year, and yet yield curves seem fairly consistent. So spend less time trying to focus on the Fed as an investor and spend more time focusing on how to build a diversified portfolio to get you high returns with minimized risk.
Let's talk about the Fed and specifically about President-elect Donald Trump's relationship with the Fed. So there are some talks of, well, obviously Trump is coming in and he's set to fight with every three-letter agency that we have in the United States. One of them may be the Fed, right? And of course, these entities are meant to be separate and so on and so forth. But the Fed has carried a lot of power of late. And they've had, obviously, a tremendous influence over the economy, particularly after the COVID pandemic. What do you think Trump will do when he comes into the White House? And what do you think he should do when it comes to the Fed?
Well, when many people say they should just eliminate the Fed altogether. The Fed's biggest sin is that they work together with the Treasury to help float debt. Debt is nothing but a tax on people, and it's a tax on people that can afford it the least, because it hits the middle class and people that are living in poverty, because it creates massive amounts of inflation. I'd like to see Trump do a hands-off approach to the Fed, stop getting it meddling in the economy, let free markets set interest rates, let free markets set prices for products. The biggest thing for Trump here coming into the presidency for the second time is he needs to cut spending. He needs to cut taxes, which will actually increase the tax base as more manufacturing comes back to the United States. And he's talking about taking the federal tax rate for corporations from 20 down to 15. That'll attract a lot of new businesses, a lot of new growth in the economy. And don't focus on the Fed so much. And I really wish you'd stop talking about Bitcoin, because I think that's a disastrous road to go down for this president and for the economy in general.
Well, that's interesting you mentioned Bitcoin. We'll come back to that in just a moment. But first I wanted to ask you about these tariffs that Trump has thrown out so much, specifically 25% against our neighbors, Canada and Mexico, but also in general. One of them is any country that deems to veer away from the dollar. He's threatened with 100% tariffs. Tell me what your views are on tariffs in general, these proposed tariffs. Are they going to hurt us? Are they going to hurt the economy? Are they that detrimental to the economy and irreversible damage? What are your thoughts on these tariffs?
Well, I'm a big free market guy. I believe the freer trade can be the better. However, I got to talk to Dr. Art Laffer, who helped engineer the Reagan recovery, and he's also a close consultant with Donald Trump. And the way he explained it, kind of the inside track is, it's highly unlikely that a lot of these tariffs will actually take place. The way that Trump tends to look at things is from a negotiation standpoint, and he's a very master negotiator. So he has these proposed tariffs as bargaining chips, trying to bring countries to the table. For example, to China, stop trying to steal our intellectual property, have freer trade, have an economy that works better for everybody. Same thing like with Russia or Iran or all these other countries that are very detrimental to the United States economy. He's really looking at this in Mexico and Canada. He's saying, look, if you don't help us stop unfair, illegal immigration into our country, stop fentanyl from coming in, stop terrorism from coming in, then we're going to hit you with a big tariff. So he's bringing a big stick to the party here, but I think mainly that's to bring our people to the negotiation tables, and whether or not it actually ends up in real tariffs, yet to be seen.
Okay. Well, let's talk about some of the legacy that the people have left behind or leaving behind. So Gary Gensler, he's the chair of the SEC, is stepping down. What does he leave behind, and what needs to change about the SEC moving forward?
Well, this is going to, from a guy that doesn't believe in a lot of regulations, this might seem a little counterintuitive, but I think one of the biggest dangers to the American economy and to investors is the whole idea of Bitcoin. In Bitcoin, you have an unregistered security. People trade it as a security. They trade it as an investment. They trade it like they would a stock or a bond, and it's completely unregulated. And you know, if an RIA or an investment advisor or a broker dealer tried to operate like that, the SEC would come in very quickly and shut things down. And I think they really need to get involved with regulating Bitcoin and how it's advertised and who can buy it and how it works. I know this is counter the Trump agenda, but I'd like to see the SEC get involved with some better regulations. On the other hand, they have some regulations that are very negative for the U.S. economy on regular investment advisors and some broker dealers. But I think they really need to address this Bitcoin issue, because I think it's a problem for America and for the global economy.
Well, clearly I know where this conversation is going, but I'm still going to bring it up anyway. Wyoming Senator Cynthia Lummis, she's deemed the Bitcoin senator. She has proposed that the U.S. Treasury acquire 1 million Bitcoin over 5 years. It's part of her Bitcoin Act of 2024. I clearly know where you stand with this, but there's no benefits whatsoever to doing such?
No, I think that would be a terrible move. I think it would be very disastrous. Investors really need to understand Bitcoin. Look, when you buy a stock, you actually buy a company, a piece of a company. You buy factories, you buy manufacturing, you buy intellectual property, you buy intellectual human capital. So you own a piece of something that's real. When you buy a bond from a corporation or from a government, you are buying a promise to get paid back from that corporation or from that country based on taxes or revenues. And so you actually have something that's real. Think about Bitcoin or cryptocurrency. First of all, it's not a currency. Currency has to be stable in price to be effective. It's wildly volatile, so it can never be a real currency. And it's not a coin. It's actually just electrons floating around in cyberspace. And then finally, there's nothing there. There's no there, which is to say that you're not actually buying anything. And you're depending on what P.T. Barnum said, a sucker is born every minute. You're hoping that somebody else will speculate with something that doesn't even exist and pay a higher price. And these so-called billionaires and geniuses in this area of Bitcoin, check Justin Sun just last week, he paid $6.2 million for a banana taped to a wall with duct tape. And that shows you the inability of these people to understand what real value is. Right. And I think investors should shy away from this. It's going to be hundreds, potentially 20, 30, 40 years before we actually understand Bitcoin. And in the meanwhile, you should run and not walk in the other direction.
Do you think that in any way, shape, or form, this is a unique and creative way to counteract what is potentially a threat from BRIC nations threatening to walk away from the dollar?
I'm not concerned about people walking away from the dollar. Look, currencies, there's wildly different swings in currencies. If you build a diversified portfolio in 70 different countries, you're going to own those different currencies in all these different places that you can invest your money. That's actually a good thing for investors because it adds diversification so that everything's not doing the exact same thing at the exact same time. I'm not worried about the dollar. I'm not worried about it being decentralized. What I do know about Bitcoin is its primary use is by criminals. It's used for bribes. It's used for scams on the internet. It's used by cartels. As far as I can see, that's the only legitimate use for it, which also makes it a key tool for criminal enterprises. And I don't see, and people look back through history and they see things like the tulip bulb bust in Holland many, many years ago, when people were paying massive amounts of money for tulip bulbs. People look at even the last tech crash you saw in 2000. Tech stocks lost 75% of all their value overnight. And still 10 years later, a decade later, they still hadn't recovered their price. S&P, people dramatically underestimate the amount of risk in the investments that they have. They barely understand the risk in their stocks. They for sure don't understand risk in exotic vehicles like commodities, gold, Bitcoin, their so-called alternatives, hedge funds. These are all toxic forms of investing. And people think they have a really twisted way of thinking, which is, if I want to be a billionaire or be rich like a billionaire, then I need to invest like a billionaire. But for every billionaire Bitcoin person, there's tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people that tried it that lost tons of money. If you're worried about creating a dream for your family, worried about the future, worried about fulfilling on your future, don't get caught up in herding bias. Don't get caught up in fear of missing out. Don't get caught up in fear of trying to make something because somebody made 20% last year. Those are all emotional and instinctive instincts human beings have, and they're very destructive in the investing process.
Okay, so a Bitcoin skeptic, to say the least. Before I let you go, I just want to ask you a question, and this is quite a leap from what we've been talking about, but I want to ask you anyway. Joe Biden is in Africa right now and is in his final days and weeks. He is what seems like to be on a spending spree, trying to, we have them promising to empty the coffers to send money to Ukraine, and he's just offered $1 billion to Africa. What say you to some of these things that he's trying to get through in his final days and weeks?
Well, from a financial standpoint, look, we need resources at home. We have people living in massive poverty at home. We have people struggling at home. We have people that can't buy a house, that have been trying to save for a house for 10 years because interest rates are so high. We have inflation. People are having a hard time putting food on the table. People are having a hard time putting gas if they still have a gas car. They're having a hard time putting gas in the car. And we're running around the world giving out handouts. And to make matters worse, he's giving these things to people, trying to bribe them to get them to like America. Well, a lot of these countries are never going to like America, no matter how much money you give them, including Iran and Russia. But it's even worse than that, because he just pardoned his son. And it's the complete unraveling. He said for years, I will not pardon my son. He has to face the legal system. There shouldn't be any inequalities. And it just makes our whole country, and especially the Democratic Party, it makes them look like they're liars. And it destroys trust in the system. And to a large degree, that's why they lost the last election. Nobody believes what they're saying. Nobody believes their policies. Nobody believes that they have anything like integrity around what they're saying. And America voted, and they voted to do away with what he's doing, and he's doubling down right as he leaves the door. And I think it's a despicable thing to do for a president.